For years he was alone. Then 3 Apache girls knocked, asking to serve him. John lived alone in a small old house at the edge of the town, where the road turned into dust and grass grew freely along the fences. For years he had lived this way, and the quiet had become a part of him. Every morning he would wake up to the soft light of dawn, the kind that crept slowly through the thin curtains and touched the worn wooden floor. He would sit on the edge of his bed for a moment, listening to the silence, a silence that had become so familiar that he sometimes felt it was his only true companion. His house was simple, a few rooms with cracked walls, faded paint, and furniture that had seen better days. The living room had an old armchair, a small table, and a bookshelf with books that John sometimes read more than once. There was a kitchen that smelled faintly of herbs he had grown in small pots by the window, and a tiny garden outside where he grew vegetables and flowers. He liked the garden because it reminded him that life could still grow quietly, even when everything else felt still. John's days followed a routine he had developed over many years. He would rise early, make a cup of tea, and sit by the window, watching the world wake up. Birds would hop along the fence, squirrels would scurry across the yard, and occasionally a neighbor's dog would bark somewhere in the distance. He rarely saw people walking by. Most of the town's residents were busy with their lives, their families, their work. And John had long stopped expecting visits. He prepared his meals alone, sometimes talking quietly to himself about what he would do during the day. Cooking was a task he did carefully, chopping vegetables, stirring soups, and making sure nothing was wasted. There was comfort in these small routines, even though he knew he was eating the same simple meals he had eaten for years. Sometimes he would set an extra plate at the table, imagining that someone might join him. He never admitted it to anyone, not even himself, but the emptiness of his house was something he felt every day. At night the quiet seemed even deeper, the creaking of the floorboards, the rustling of the wind in the trees outside, the occasional sound of a car passing far down the road. They all reminded him of how isolated he had become. John had not always been alone. He had a family once, many years ago when the house had been full of laughter and voices, but time had changed everything. His spouse had passed away, leaving a space in his life that could never truly be filled. His children had moved far away for jobs and families of their own. They called sometimes, but visits were rare, and letters were mostly about everyday matters, not the quiet longing that John carried in his heart. Despite the loneliness, John had grown used to it. He found peace in the small things, watering the garden, reading books, fixing little problems around the house. He would sometimes sit for hours staring at the sky, feeling the sun warm his face or watching the clouds move slowly across the horizon. These moments reminded him that life was still moving, even if he felt disconnected from it. On some days, memories would come uninvited, and John would find himself lost in the past. He would remember his spouse's laughter, the smell of the kitchen when meals were shared, the joy of children running through the yard. These memories were both comforting and painful. They reminded him of love and happiness, but also of what he had lost. Sometimes he would touch the edge of a photograph, worn from years of looking at it, and whisper the names of his loved ones. Even though he lived alone, John was not bitter. He had accepted his life as it was and tried to find meaning in small acts. He would help the occasional neighbor who asked for advice or repair work. He would nod politely when passing people on the road, and sometimes share a story with a shopkeeper in town. These brief connections, though small, reminded him that he was still part of the world, even if only in tiny ways. John also had a few hobbies that kept him occupied. He loved to read old books, especially biographies of people who had lived through difficult times. He admired their strength and courage and often thought about how their lives had shaped them. He also enjoyed tending to his garden, Growing vegetables and flowers gave him a sense of purpose, though. He knew that even if he was alone, life continued around him. He planted seeds, watered them, and watched them grow slowly, a reminder that hope could exist quietly in the background of life. There were days when loneliness felt heavier, nights when the wind blew through the cracks in the windows, and the house seemed too big, too empty. On those days, John would sit by the fire, if he could light it, or wrap himself in a blanket and stare at the stars. The stars had always been a source of comfort. He liked to imagine that someone else, somewhere, might be looking at the same stars, feeling the same quiet and peace. It was a thought that made the silence bearable. John's life was a quiet one, and he had grown skilled at filling the emptiness with small joys. He knew the names of the birds that visited his garden, the paths that squirrels liked to take, the times when the sunlight would hit the kitchen table just right. Every detail mattered because it reminded him that he was alive and that the world still moved outside his small house. Even though he accepted his solitude, John sometimes wondered what it would be like to have someone at the door, a visitor who cared, someone to share stories with. But he quickly pushed the thought away. Life had taught him to be cautious, to expect little, and to find comfort in his own company. He had grown resilient, patient, and self-sufficient, though his heart quietly longed for connection he hadn't felt in many years. And so John continued his days, slowly, deliberately, with the rhythm of his life set long ago. He would water the plants, read the books, cook the meals, and sit by the window watching the sky. He knew he would always carry the memories of his past with him, a mix of joy and sorrow, and that the silence around him would continue to be both friend and companion. But somewhere deep inside, a small part of him still hoped that the quiet might one day be interrupted, that perhaps life had something unexpected in store for him. One quiet afternoon, as John was sitting by the window sipping his tea and watching the sunlight dance on the old wooden floor, he heard a sound he had not expected in many years. There was a gentle knock at the door. His first thought was that it must be a neighbor needing help with something small, or perhaps a delivery. But when he looked through the dusty window beside the door, he saw not one, but 3 young girls standing there, smiling politely. They were dressed in simple clothes, and their eyes shone with warmth and confidence. John hesitated for a moment. It had been a long time since anyone had knocked at his door just to visit, and even longer since anyone had come with a friendly purpose. He wiped his hands on a towel, straightened his back, and slowly opened the door. "Hello," said the tallest of the girls, her voice calm and polite. "We are here to help you." John blinked, not quite understanding. "Bets. Help me?" he asked cautiously. "Who are you?" The middle girl stepped forward and smiled. "We are from the Apache community nearby. We like to help elders who live alone."
"We heard that you live by yourself, and we wanted to see if you needed any assistance."
John felt a mixture of surprise and suspicion. It had been so long since someone had offered help without asking for anything in return that he wasn't sure what to say. I'm fine," he replied slowly, unsure if he should let strangers into his life. The youngest girl spoke gently. "We don't mean to intrude. We just want to help with small things around the house or errands or anything you need." "We don't stay long if you don't want us to." John looked at the 3 girls carefully. They seemed honest, polite, and genuinely kind. He could see it in the way they held themselves, the warmth in their eyes, and the respect in their voices. But the idea of letting strangers into his quiet life was new and frightening.
He hesitated, unsure if he should accept their offer.
For a long moment no one spoke. The wind rustled through the trees outside, and a few birds chirped in the garden. John felt a strange mix of caution and curiosity. He realized that, Deep down, he wanted companionship, even if he had long tried to ignore it. He remembered the empty meals, the quiet nights, and the memories that often visited him uninvited. And for the first time in many years, he thought that maybe, just maybe, having someone around would not be so bad. "All right," he said finally, his voice soft but steady. "You can. Come in." The girls' faces lit up with smiles. They stepped inside carefully, taking in the small, modest house. John noticed how they looked around respectfully, not touching anything without asking. It was a small gesture, but it made him feel at ease. They introduced themselves properly. The tallest was Maya, the middle one Leah, and the youngest Sienna. They explained that they had volunteered to help elders in the community because they believed in kindness, respect, and learning from the wisdom of older generations. John listened quietly, intrigued by their purpose. It was not just help. They came with respect and a desire to connect. At first, John was cautious about letting them do much. He guided them through the house, showing them what needed attention and what they could do. Maya suggested fixing the leaky faucet in the kitchen. Leah offered to tidy the garden, and Sienna wanted to help with the small chores that often piled up in the house. John felt a strange mix of gratitude and discomfort. He had always been self-reliant, proud of handling his life alone, but he also realized that a helping hand could make daily life easier and brighter. As the girls began their work, John found himself observing them quietly. He noticed small things, the way Maya carefully tightened a loose pipe, the way Leah smiled while pulling weeds gently so as not to hurt the flowers, and the way Sienna hummed softly while arranging dishes neatly. Their care and attention surprised him. They were not rushing, not careless, not pretending to help. They genuinely wanted to make his life easier. After a while, they paused and sat at the small kitchen table. Maya poured some tea for everyone, and they talked about small, simple things. The girls shared stories of their community, their families, and the traditions they cherished. John listened, fascinated by their words. Their lives were different from his own, yet their kindness, patience, and respect felt universal. John, in turn, began sharing small parts of his life. He spoke carefully, telling stories about his garden, his favorite books, and some memories of his past. He did not speak about the deepest pains yet, but he allowed himself to enjoy their company. The girls listened intently, asking questions politely, and sometimes laughing softly at little humorous moments. It felt strange but comforting to hear laughter in the house after so many years of silence. Over the next few hours, a sense of trust slowly grew between them. The girls worked on the chores diligently, while John occasionally offered guidance or advice. The house seemed brighter somehow, not just because of the sunlight or the tidying, but because of the presence of living, caring people. Rest. John realized he had not felt this alive in a long time. As the day went on, the girls mentioned that they would visit again if he was willing. John hesitated for a moment, thinking about the quiet routine he had grown used to. But he also thought about the laughter, the conversation, and the sense of care he had felt. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of hope. "Yes," he said finally. I would like that. Please come again." Their smiles widened, and Sienna reached out to shake his hand.
"We will, sir, you can count on us." That evening after they had left, John sat alone for a while.
The house was quiet again, but it did not feel empty. He remembered the warmth of their smiles, the sound of their voices, and the sense of care that had filled the rooms. For the first time in a long while, he felt a little lighter, a little less alone. He thought about the strange twist of fate that had brought 3 young girls to his door. It seemed almost like a story from another life.
A story where kindness could appear unexpectedly, even when one had given up hope. John realized that perhaps life still had surprises in store, moments that could bring joy and connection when least expected. That night, John went to bed with a small smile on his face. The quiet was still there, but it felt softer somehow. He knew that tomorrow and the days after might bring more visits, more conversation, and more warmth into his life. And for the first time in years, he looked forward to it. The next morning, he woke up earlier than usual. The sunlight streaming through the window felt brighter, the birds chirping more cheerful. He went to the kitchen, brewed a cup of tea, and glanced at the small garden. Something had changed. The air seemed lighter, the world slightly less lonely. He knew that the presence of the girls, the kindness of strangers, had opened a door in his heart that he had not realized was closed. As he sat by the window sipping his tea, he thought about how fragile life could be and how quickly it could change. One knock at the door, one moment of courage from 3 young girls had altered the course of his days. He realized that even in the quietest, loneliest lives, human connection could appear, sometimes from the most unexpected places, bringing hope, joy, and a sense of belonging that had been missing for far too long.
John smiled again, feeling a mix of gratitude and anticipation.
The world had reached out to him in the form of 3 kind-hearted girls, and he knew that from that moment, life would not be the same. The emptiness that had defined so many years would slowly begin to fade, replaced by laughter, conversation, and the warmth of genuine care. After that first visit, John found himself thinking about the 3 girls often. Their presence had brought a warmth into his home that he had long forgotten. When the next morning came, he almost felt excited to see what the day would bring. He had never imagined he would look forward to visits from strangers, yet here he was, anticipating the sound of footsteps on the path outside his house. Breath. When the girls arrived again, they carried small baskets and bags filled with supplies. Maya, the tallest, had some tools. Leah had a few potted plants and gardening gloves. Sienna held fresh bread and some fruits. They greeted John cheerfully, and he felt a genuine smile spread across his face. It was different from the polite smiles he often gave neighbors. It was full of relief and anticipation. "Good morning, sir," Maya said. "We thought we could start with the garden today. It looks like some of your plants need water and care." John nodded. "Yes, that would be very helpful. Thank you." They stepped into the yard, carefully tending to each plant. Leah pointed out small weeds that had begun to grow between the flowers, and Sienna gently pruned some of the tomato plants. John observed quietly, fascinated by how careful and attentive they were. He had always tended to his garden alone, but the way they worked made him see it differently. There was care and love in each small movement. As they worked, John began talking. At first it was simple comments about the weather or how the plants were growing, but gradually he found himself sharing more, how he had planted certain flowers in memory of his spouse, or how some vegetables reminded him of meals he used to cook for his children. The girls listened attentively, asking questions softly, showing that they were truly interested. John felt a strange mix of comfort and surprise. He had not shared stories like this in years, and yet here were 3 young people listening with respect and warmth. After finishing in the garden, they moved to the house. Maya offered to check a few things that needed repair. There was a loose handle on a kitchen cabinet, a squeaky door hinge, and an old lamp that had stopped working. John had always fixed such things himself, but he realized that letting someone help didn't diminish his independence. It simply made life easier. He watched Maya carefully tighten the handle, oil the hinges, and adjust the lamp, feeling a sense of relief and quiet gratitude. Leah, meanwhile, tidied the living room and kitchen, putting things in order. Sienna sat nearby, helping John with small tasks, arranging books, cleaning surfaces, and even chopping vegetables for the evening meal.
John realized how much he had been struggling silently with these small tasks, and now they seemed lighter, almost enjoyable, with help. During breaks, they sat together at the small kitchen table. They shared a simple meal of bread, fruit, and tea. The conversation flowed naturally.
The girls spoke about their lives, their schoolwork, their families, and traditions from the Apache community. John listened, fascinated by the stories of ceremonies, dances, and customs that were so different from his own upbringing.
At the same time, he shared stories from his life, tales of childhood, adventures, and lessons learned. For the first time in years, the house echoed with laughter and conversation. John realized that he had not expected to feel such connection. He had grown accustomed to silence, thinking it was normal, but now he understood how much he had missed genuine companionship. The girls were kind, respectful, and patient. They did not rush him or judge him. They simply listened and shared. It was a simple human connection, but to John it felt extraordinary. Over the next few weeks, this became routine. The girls visited regularly, sometimes daily, sometimes a few times a week, depending on their school schedule. They helped John with chores, the garden, and small repairs, but more importantly, they brought energy and life into the house. John began looking forward to their visits, not just for the help, but for the stories, the laughter, and the warmth they brought. John started participating more actively, too. He shared old recipes with Sienna, showing her how to knead dough and prepare simple meals.
He taught Leah a few tricks about gardening that only years of experience could give.
He even showed Maya how to fix minor electrical problems safely. The girls absorbed everything eagerly, learning from his experience while also teaching him about new ways of seeing the world. One afternoon, as they were sitting outside after watering the garden, Sienna asked, "Do you miss having family around?" John paused, feeling a sudden wave of emotion.
He nodded slowly.
Yes, I do. But I've learned to live with it.
But life goes on, and we do what we can.
Leah spoke gently. Sometimes family isn't only those who are related by blood.
Sometimes it's people who care for you, who respect you, who make you feel safe.
John looked at the three of them, realizing that she was right.
These girls, who had come as strangers, were becoming a part of his life, a part of his small world. They were his family now, in a way he had not expected.
As the days turned into weeks, John noticed changes in himself. He felt lighter, more energetic, and more motivated.
Tasks that had once seemed tedious became enjoyable because they were shared. He laughed more, told more stories, and even began planning small improvements to his home. He realized that human connection, even in unexpected forms, could bring life back into a quiet, lonely heart. The girls also brought new experiences into his life. Maya shared books and stories she loved. Leah taught him small games from her culture, and Sienna showed him how to appreciate little joys, like watching clouds, drawing simple sketches, or baking small treats together. Each day, John discovered something new, not just about them, but about himself. He remembered the joy of learning, of curiosity, and of feeling connected. One day, John invited them to join him for a small dinner he had prepared. It was a simple meal, but he had made it with care, wanting to express his gratitude. The girls were touched. They sat together around the table, sharing food, laughter, and conversation. The house, once quiet and lonely, was filled with warmth. John realized that these moments were priceless, a gift he had not expected in the quiet of his life. Even the small, everyday moments became special. Walking through the garden together, fixing the roof, or simply sitting on the porch watching the sunset, it all felt meaningful. John had not realized how much life he had been missing, how empty the days had felt until they were filled with shared experiences, care, and attention. Over time, the girls became more than helpers.
They became companions, friends, and teachers in their own way. They encouraged him to share stories he had never told anyone, listened without judgment, and even helped him reconnect with small joys he had long forgotten. John felt an emotional bond growing with them, a bond built on trust, kindness, and genuine human connection. As part 3 of his life unfolded, John understood that change did not always come suddenly. It could come gently, like the soft knock on a door, like the laughter of 3 young girls who cared enough to make a difference. He realized that the loneliness he had accepted for so many years was slowly being replaced by something deeper: hope, warmth, and belonging. By the time evening came, John felt a deep sense of gratitude. The sun had set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The girls were cleaning up their tools, chatting happily, and planning their next visit. John looked around his home, the tidy rooms, the flourishing garden, and the small signs of life everywhere, and felt a joy he had not known in years. He knew that life had a way of surprising people, even when they had stopped expecting it. And he understood that even the smallest acts of kindness could transform a life, making the world brighter, warmer, and full of connection. For John, the visits of the 3 girls were not just help. They were a lifeline, a reason to look forward to each day, and proof that even in the quietest, loneliest places, friendship, care, and love could still flourish. As the days passed, John's life began to feel very different from what it had been for so many years. The house, once quiet and still, was now full of energy, laughter, and conversation. The girls had become a part of his daily routine. Their visits were no longer occasional. They were expected, anticipated, and treasured. Each day, John woke up with a sense of purpose he had not felt in a long time, eager to see them and share small moments of life. One morning, John noticed that his back was aching more than usual. It had been stiff for some time, but that day it made simple tasks like reaching for a teapot or bending to pick up vegetables more difficult. As he sat by the window trying to stretch and ease the pain, he realized that he could not manage everything on his own. For the first time, he truly needed help, in a way that was more than just convenience. It was necessary. When the girls arrived that day, John greeted them quietly. He did not usually complain about small aches or pains, but he realized that he could trust them. Maya, noticing the slight strain in his movements, asked gently, "Are you feeling all right, sir?" John hesitated, then nodded. "Operation. I'm fine. Just, little stiff today." Desperate, Leah suggested, "Why don't we help with some chores today? You can sit and relax." "It will be easier on your back." John felt a warmth in his chest. He had spent so many years insisting on doing everything alone, proud of his independence, that the idea of letting others take care of him felt strange, but comforting. For the first time, he realized that accepting help did not make him weak. It allowed life to be shared, lighter and more joyful. The girls worked together to manage the chores. Maya repaired a small leak in the kitchen sink, Leah tidied the garden, and Sienna prepared some ingredients for the evening meal. John sat in his favorite armchair observing quietly and felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had learned to live alone, but now he understood that human connection was far more valuable than pride or self-reliance. During a short break, they all sat together at the kitchen table. Sienna handed John a cup of tea, and he smiled at her carefully folded hands around the warm mug. "Thank you," he said softly.
"You have no idea how much this helps me."
Maya and Leah exchanged glances, and Leah said, "It is our pleasure, sir. We enjoy being here with you."
"We learn from you, and we like helping you." John felt a lump in his throat. It had been decades since someone had said words like that to him, words that were sincere, not obligatory. The feeling of being valued, of being cared for, was almost overwhelming. He realized that the girls were more than helpers. They had become his friends, his companions, and in a way, his family. A few days later, John woke up feeling unusually weak. He tried to stand and move about, but a sudden dizziness made him pause. For the first time in years, he felt truly vulnerable. He had lived alone for so long that even small illnesses or aches had been ignored, but this time, he knew he could not manage alone. The girls arrived as usual, laughing and chatting, but the moment they saw his expression, their mood changed. Sienna approached quickly. "Sir, are you all right?" she asked, her voice full of concern. John nodded weakly, trying to smile. I think I just need to rest." Maya immediately guided him to sit down, supporting him carefully. Leah brought a glass of water and some light food. The girls worked together quietly and efficiently, taking care of him without making him feel helpless. John realized that he could trust them completely. In that moment he felt the depth of their care, and it filled a space in his heart he had long thought empty. As the day progressed, the girls stayed by his side, helping him with meals, encouraging him to rest, and sharing small stories to lift his spirits. John felt a mixture of relief, gratitude, and a quiet joy he had not known in years. For the first time, he realized that friendship and care could be as important as the physical tasks they performed. The love and attention they showed were healing in ways he had never imagined. Narration. During a quiet moment, John found himself speaking softly about his past. "I lost my wife many years ago," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And after that, I thought I would live like this forever, alone. I never expected anyone to come along and care like you do." Maya sat beside him, her eyes gentle.
"Life can surprise us, sir. Sometimes it gives us family in unexpected forms."
"You may not have chosen to be alone, but now you are not alone anymore." John looked at them, feeling a wave of emotion. These girls who had come into his life as strangers had become a bridge back to hope, joy, and human connection. He realized that life had a way of opening doors when least expects it, and that kindness, simple, sincere kindness, could transform the quietest hearts. In the weeks that followed, the bond between John and the girls grew stronger. They shared stories, cooked meals together, and laughed about small things. Breath. Sometimes they would play simple games or watch the sunset from the porch. Each moment, no matter how small, became meaningful. John discovered that joy could be found not only in large events but in everyday interactions, shared smiles, and acts of care. One afternoon, as they sat together in the garden, John felt the urge to teach them something he had always loved. He took out a small notebook and showed them sketches he had drawn over the years. Drawings of flowers, trees, and simple scenes from his past. The girls admired the work, asking questions about his technique and the memories behind each drawing. John realized that sharing these small pieces of his life brought him more joy than he could have imagined. The girls, too, began sharing more of themselves. They spoke of dreams, hopes, and the values they cherished in their community. They taught John about Apache traditions, songs, and stories. John listened, fascinated, feeling a connection to a world he had never known, and at the same time feeling that his own life mattered, that his experiences had value. The house, once a quiet refuge, had become a place of life and learning. John realized that he had not just gained helpers. He had gained companions who enriched his life in ways beyond simple tasks. They had brought laughter, conversation, and love into a home that had been quiet for far too long. One evening, John found himself reflecting on the changes that had occurred. He thought about the loneliness he had carried for decades, the quiet nights and empty meals, and he realized that all of it had prepared him for this moment, the moment when kindness, trust, and companionship entered his life unexpectedly. "What is this?" He understood that human connection, no matter how small it seemed at first, could heal, inspire, and bring warmth that lasts a lifetime. From that day on, John's life was transformed not just by what the girls did, but by how they made him feel. He felt valued, loved, and understood. He began to smile more freely, laugh more often, and look forward to each new day. The quiet loneliness that had defined so many years of his life was replaced by a sense of purpose, belonging, and joy that he had thought was lost forever.
Even simple things, like sitting in the garden and sharing tea, became moments of celebration.
But John found himself planning small surprises for the girls. Freshly baked bread, a new flower planted in the garden, or a little story he thought they would enjoy. These acts, though small, brought him as much happiness as their visits had brought him. He realized that caring for others could be as fulfilling as receiving care, and that life's joy often came from giving and sharing, not just from living alone. By the end of Part 4, John understood a simple truth. Life could be transformed by kindness, patience, and genuine human connection. The girls had opened his heart in ways he had not believed possible, and he had learned that love and friendship could come unexpectedly, often when least expected. His world, once quiet and still, had become rich, vibrant, and full of hope. And John knew that the days ahead would continue to be bright, because now he was not alone, and his heart was open to the happiness life could bring.
Life had changed completely for John.
The house that once felt quiet, empty, and cold was now alive with energy, laughter, and conversation. The three girls, Maya, Leah, and Sienna, had become an essential part of his life. Their visits were no longer simply helpful. They had become moments he eagerly awaited, moments that brought warmth to his heart and a smile to his face. One sunny morning, John sat on the porch sipping his tea and watching the garden bloom under the girls' care. The flowers were brighter than ever, the vegetables thriving in neat rows, and the air smelled fresh and clean. John felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He had always enjoyed gardening, but now it brought him more than just a sense of accomplishment. It reminded him of life's beauty, the joy of shared moments, and the importance of caring for something together.
The girls arrived as usual, carrying baskets of supplies and cheerful smiles.
Maya brought new tools to fix a small crack in the kitchen wall. Leah had flowers to plant, and Sienna had homemade bread she had baked early that morning. John welcomed them warmly, feeling an excitement he had not known in years. It was not just the work they would do. It was the connection, the shared moments, and the laughter that accompanied them. They began the day with small tasks. Maya repaired the wall while John watched, occasionally offering advice or sharing memories of when he had done similar work. Leah and Sienna worked in the garden, planting the new flowers carefully, making sure each one had enough sunlight and water. John moved slowly among them, watering some plants, arranging tools, and feeling grateful for their company.
He realized that life was no longer about enduring loneliness. It was about participating, sharing, and enjoying small victories.
During a short break, they all sat at the kitchen table, sharing fresh bread and tea. Conversation flowed easily, full of laughter and small stories. John shared tales from his past, anecdotes from childhood, and memories of adventures he had experienced long ago. The girls listened intently, asking questions and expressing curiosity. Their genuine interest made him feel valued and respected, and he realized that these moments were more meaningful than he could have imagined.
Later, John decided to show the girls something special.
He opened a small wooden box he had kept for years, filled with photographs, letters, and mementos from his past. He carefully took out a few photographs and showed them, telling stories about the people in them, the places he had visited, and the experiences he had cherished. The girls were fascinated, leaning closer to see each detail, asking questions and listening attentively. John felt a sense of pride and connection he had not felt in decades. As the day went on, the girls suggested they all work on a small project together. John had always wanted to build a small bench in the garden, a place where he could sit and enjoy the sunset. Maya, Leah, and Sienna eagerly agreed to help. Together they measured the wood, hammered nails carefully, and painted the bench with bright, cheerful colors. John realized that this simple activity was more than just work. It was a symbol of collaboration, trust, and friendship. By the time the bench was finished, it looked beautiful, and John felt a deep sense of joy. That evening, they all sat on the newly built bench, watching the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange, pink, and purple, and the gentle breeze carried the scent of flowers from the garden. John felt a calm happiness he had not known in years. He looked at the girls, their faces glowing in the fading sunlight, and felt a profound gratitude. They had transformed not just his house, but his life. Their presence had brought hope, warmth, and love into a world that had been quiet for far too long. One day, John received a letter from one of his children. It had been years since he had heard anything substantial from them, and the letter made him reflect on how much had changed. He realized that while his children were far away and busy with their own lives, he had found a family here, in his own home, through the kindness and care of 3 young girls. The thought brought tears to his eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sadness. He understood that family was not only about blood, it was about connection, care, and shared experiences.
As weeks turned into months, John's health improved.
The girls continued to visit, helping with chores, sharing meals, and simply spending time together.
They celebrated small milestones, the first tomatoes of the season, the repair of a squeaky door, or a freshly painted fence.
Each achievement, no matter how small, became a shared moment of happiness, a reminder that life was richer when experienced together. John also began to contribute in new ways. He taught the girls how to make simple crafts, shared his knowledge of plants and gardening, and told stories that had been kept in his heart for decades. The girls absorbed everything eagerly, learning not just skills but life lessons about patience, resilience, and kindness. John realized that this exchange of knowledge and experience was mutual. They gave him companionship, laughter, and love, and he gave them wisdom, stories, and guidance. One afternoon, as they were sitting together in the garden, Sienna said softly, "Sir, we are happy we came to help you. You have taught us so much, and we love being here with you." John felt a wave of emotion. For decades he had felt invisible, alone, and forgotten. Now he was cherished, respected, and loved. "I am glad you are here," he replied, his voice trembling slightly. "You have brought so much joy into my life. I cannot thank you enough." Leah added, "We don't need thanks. We enjoy your company." "That is enough for us." John smiled, realizing how precious their words were. Round. It was not just the help they provided. It was the love, care, and connection that had changed his life completely. He understood that life's true value lay in these moments of shared humanity, not in possessions, routines, or even memories alone. As the sun set and the evening grew calm, John reflected on the journey he had been through. From years of solitude and quiet, he had found friendship, laughter, and love in the most unexpected way. The 3 girls had opened his heart, filling it with hope, warmth, and purpose. They had shown him that even in the quietest, loneliest lives, human connection could flourish, bringing joy and meaning that lasts a lifetime. By the end of Part 5, John's life had been transformed completely. The house, once a silent refuge, was now a home filled with love, care, and laughter. The garden bloomed under shared hands, the walls echoed with stories, and John's heart was lighter, fuller, and open to life's possibilities. The girls were not just helpers, they were family, friends, and a reminder that kindness and compassion can change the course of a life. John often sat on the bench they had built together, looking at the sunset and feeling a deep sense of peace. He knew that the world could be unpredictable, that loneliness could be overwhelming, but he had also learned that love, care, and friendship can appear unexpectedly, transforming even the quietest lives into stories of hope and joy. The simple acts of 3 young girls had brought him back to life, proving that human connection is one of the most powerful forces in the world.
And so, John's life, once quiet and lonely, was now filled with warmth, laughter, and love.
He had learned that life could surprise anyone at any time, and that even small gestures of kindness can leave an impact far greater than imagined. With Maya, Leah, and Sienna by his side, John faced each new day with a smile, gratitude in his heart, and the comforting knowledge that he was no longer alone.